Good morning, and I'm grateful to be here, and I get to be first. So I'm Jake Ströh, as you know, and my short time here in Nashville, I've noticed that everybody I've met out in the city are singer and songwriters. So I'm Jake Ströh, and I'm a singer and songwriter. So yeah, I have a guitar. So, anyway, let's see a little bit about me. I did start off in audio engineering and video production a long, long time ago. I went to Full Sail University, and you've heard of that, and my first job out of school, I produced national radio and TV ads in Chicago. I got to work with some amazing voice talent. Got to spend the day working with John Candy one day, actually, on a little movie. He was doing some voice work, this movie called Home Alone or something. So anyway, and so years later, I started my own development company called Lake Effect Multimedia, and working with audio and video and getting into this new thing called the web or something. So it's a little bit about me. So I was thinking about, I was a Flash developer for over 12 years. So I was kind of thinking, I could name this session, One Man's Journey to Change, right? Or something like that. And so being a Flash developer for as long as I was, what really drew me to that tool was my background in audio and video, and being able to integrate sound, video, and interactivity, which then led me to develop motion graphics and other things, because I've always loved the, shall we say, there's a really great feeling when motion and sound work together in unison. So that's what really drew me to Flash early on. And I did a lot of touchscreen interactivity development for trade shows and that sort of stuff. And this was right before, smartphones and the iPhone came out. And we didn't really know what the sea change was going to be upon us as a Flash developer when the iPhone was introduced. I know I certainly thought it would be really, really cool to be able to take some of these motion graphic concepts and ideas and have them on this new touchscreen device. But it didn't take long to find out that Adobe, I think, as far as the Flash player goes, they weren't really interested in making that work on a device, or, well, they made it work on some devices, but it certainly did not work well. So we quickly then had to look at other options. And initially, I tried working with HTML5 Canvas, which I am a coder. It's great, but it's not intuitive in the same creative way, in the creative space, the way timeline-based animation and keyframes work. I also took a look at some jQuery libraries. Tween.js is great, but again, it's still not that same workflow approach. And I had already been using GreenSock in conjunction with things in Flash, which is another type of animation library. And it's nice to see that GreenSock has adopted kind of an HTML5 JavaScript jQuery type library currently, but still not the same thing as Hype. Clearly some great tools, but just not the same workflow. And so I was looking for something out there in the world. There had to be something that would be moving forward without Flash that had to have a similar workflow. And for me, it was pretty easy once I discovered Hype that this was definitely, I felt like I had found a friend who was ready to move on with me to the next chapter in the world of creating motion graphics and interactivity. So I was very happy when I first found Hive. As a matter of fact, when I first opened it, it was more kind of like, oh wow, 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 you know. So, so I started developing things in Hive, but my approach was still more as a Flash developer. So making motion graphics, or this is just a very simplified example, you know, like a slideshow or interactive maps. I did some of things like this, but it was more about, cool, it's on desktop and it works on a full-featured browser in mobile, but we hadn't really started thinking about the world of responsiveness yet. So, being a Flash developer, I used to do a lot of prototyping in Fireworks. Love that tool, and I used it probably entirely too long. I didn't want to give it up. You know, when you're familiar with something, you kind of want to stick to it. So I started thinking about prototyping for mobile and showing people, this is what your website's going to look like on a mobile phone. Maybe not necessarily responsive, but we can do things with cascading style sheets and whatnot to at least make it look this way. So I started, when I discovered the Hype Reflect app and started bouncing things over to my iPhone and later my iPad, I thought, okay, this is completely in line with how I present work to clients. And that is, you always show them on the medium for which it is supposed to be presented. Because there's nothing worse than, I have a background in graphic design, there's nothing worse than seeing like old graphic designers printing out and mounting on museum board web screenshots. It's just not the same experience, but I've witnessed this. And so in my career, I'm always like, well, you need to put the device or the computer screen or whatever it's going to be delivered on in front of the client, put it in their hands. So I started playing around with prototyping in Hive, bringing in graphics, creating elements and whatnot inside of Hive, and bouncing it over to the Reflect app. And I thought, wow, this is really going to be great because this is really going to be an awesome way to present ideas to clients. And it worked great. And then in version 2.5, Hype came out with flexible layouts and pins and sizing. And this was also around about the time that I was doing more development in responsive web. And so I started kind of playing around with that idea. And I thought I would just show you, oh boy, this is going to be fun with the, there we go. Let me get out of here. Can I?
A little small, but a little more.
Scale, yeah. Oh, wow. I don't know if that'll be good for you guys when you're back, but we'll see. Where are we at? Let's try 720 real quick. Yeah, that's acceptable. So I started playing around with this new responsive layout using pins, and you couldn't necessarily, in one document, you couldn't necessarily create things and have everything respond on all the various different viewport sizes, such as iPhone, iPad, or desktop. But you could kind of at least show them how it might respond with the orientation of a device, whether it's in landscape or portrait. And so I started playing around with pins and sizing. And so without it, you have kind of what you would expect kind of in the pre-responsiveness world. But by going into in the inspector, going to the scene and setting it to scale to 100%, and then applying that if you have multiple scenes, just doing that alone, and then going in and here in the metrics inspector, going in here and setting some of these things here. And I love this animation. It kind of shows you what's going to happen to the element that you select. And by selecting these things, you can either pin them up against one edge, or it can respond to top, right, left, bottom, either one, all four. We could also have something like this, which is just a simple nav bar. If you just wanted that to span the entire width of the viewport, no matter how wide it is, you can set that to be 100% all the way across, left and right, just by selecting these arrows right here. And you can go through and you can play around with it for a little while, kind of get a feel for it. But going through and selecting all the elements on the page and what are their relationships to the element above it and next to it. So once you go through and do all those steps, what you have here is you have something that responds like this. But if we were to actually put this on an iPad in landscape mode, and then if you were to rotate it to portrait, you'd see that the design responds enough to where you could show somebody this is how this is going to behave in this responsive environment. So flexible layout with pins and sizing. And that is still a very useful tool in the current version of 3.5. But then, in version 3, they came out with layouts, which have layouts and breakpoints. And that was like the game changer for me in using height to prototype not only web, but experiences just for a device. So you're able to select iPhone, iPad, all the different viewports, and in conjunction with scenes, you can have all these different layouts, and you can set up your staging area in each of these layouts, and when they hit that breakpoint, whatever that viewport size is, it's going to switch over to that layout. So in the limited amount of time that we have, I tried to come up with just really, really simple examples. So what I did here, this is just kind of a faux client. I do have a UIUX Studio client, and this is exactly how, when I developed their website, that I showed them how their website was going to look on different devices. But what's great is you can set up these layouts for iPhone in the portrait, iPhone in landscape, I can do iPad, and of course I can do desktop. And again, it's as simple as creating a new layout, adding that layout to your layouts, and then moving these elements around however you want on that layout. So however the spacing is. And also in conjunction, you still do need to scale things to 100%, or at least I think that it's a really great way to still have the relationship between these different items being spaced out with pins, so that they understand what the elements that are next to them are and how they're going to respond and react, whether it's to the left, top, right, bottom, or all four. Also setting images and image sizes to respond, which I have, I think, one of these here, right here. I have this little slideshow that's another really nice thing about prototyping, is that you can actually just create something really simple as this slideshow. It's going to go through and fade from one photo to the next, or not, because I'm doing a demo in front of people, and it always works when I'm doing it myself and not in front of the group. I assure you it will play though. But making sure that you have some options here when you're dealing with images that's really, really cool. And that is, you can tell these to shrink to fit, or you can tell them to expand to fill. You also have to make sure that these arrows here are set so that it understands the parameters of resizing. In this particular example, I really like shrink to fit because I wanted it to be able to take it from a larger size and have it scale down, which is exactly what this will do. So if I, in going through and creating all my different layouts, I can do iPad and landscape, iPad and portrait, which for some reason this isn't resizing quite the way I want it to. So I'd have to go in and play around with that. This is iPhone landscape and iPhone portrait. And then of course I kind of mocked up the hamburger menu is what I call it officially. I think we've all agreed it's the hamburger menu, yeah. And so I put that in there, and if I were to continue building in Hype and having access to all the different scenes and all the different timelines that I can create, I would make this into an animated drop-down menu or something on tab where it would just kind of reveal itself. And then we could actually make targeted little choices and jump to different scenes, and we could show different content, and pretty much in a really, really short amount of time, build out almost an entire website if it's relatively small, or at least all the major sections of a website, and send it over to the Hype Reflect app, put it into the client's hands, and have them start tapping on it and going through the different pages. And for someone like me, that's like, it's a no-brainer. It's very exciting. It's really great to get feedback. You get better feedback. I get better feedback from clients just based on putting it onto the Hype Reflect app, handing them a device, having them go through it, and getting really honest feedback rather than trying to conceptually explain how it's all going to operate and work. So that, as I continued using Hype, there were some projects that I've worked on in the past where they were only intended for a device, a tablet. One of them is Buell Motorcycles, if you've ever heard of them. Eric Buell developed a new motorcycle for his racing team, and I was tasked with coming up with, or at least developing on the front end, an interface for training their technicians. They used to fly mechanical technicians into Wisconsin and put them up in a hotel for weeks at a time and have them go through all this training. And so we wanted to develop some sort of an integration into an intranet kind of structure or portal and have training videos. And since I had just finished doing my first Lynda.com title for Hype, I thought, this is great because I do a lot of video content as well. So I was in charge of producing over 1,500 videos and designing the user interface and how that was going to behave as a training tool. And it was all, the only delivery was going to be on an iPad for that. And that was about a 2-year project, and it turned out really great. But I started with Hype, and I prototyped out the user interface and how it's going to behave. I even put some video in there, which, by the way, working with video in Hype is a dream. I really love it. And so using the Hype Reflect app, I was able to put it right into their hands, and they understood the idea and the concept, and we went right into production, and it turned out great. And I'm also working on another app right now that is addresses the healthcare industry and exercise, physical therapy type exercise and retention, but that's still in production, so I don't really have a lot of full-ended examples that I can show you, but the other thing that HyperReflect is really great for is if you have an idea for an app, being able, again, to send it over to the Reflect app and to have all these different types of interactivity or whatever your idea is, a combination of motion, video, audio, all interactivity. So I teach a UIUX design course at UW Milwaukee, and I have them solve a lot of different problems, everything from really working on scaling and resizing. I have a whole project that's just based on scaling and resizing. But by the time they become a little bit more advanced through the semester and utilizing Hype, their final project is their choice. And they all go towards, I want to do a game. And I know someone is speaking about retro gaming later on. But some of the things that the students come up with, because they're so eager, this is part of the graphic design program at UW Milwaukee. So they start to see what their imagination can do in just getting the idea across. So if you were to hand this off to an actual iPhone developer, they'd have a pretty good idea how the interactions and whatnot work. So I thought I would bring along some examples. This first example is Collectivo Coffee is a coffee roaster in Milwaukee. They're really great, and they have really great artwork, great design. I'm friends with the creative director at Collectivo Coffee. And so one of my students came up with this thing called the coffee selector, where you can select these different types of coffee. By scrolling through, you can select the coffee, and it gives you the price, and it gives you tasting notes and information about that coffee, which is great. But this next feature is what I really like best, and that is by choosing the different characteristics of the coffee by roast and body and acidity, it would suggest then what type of coffee you would probably want to purchase. A music player is a project that I do every semester with my students, because we're all using Spotify or iTunes or Amazon Music Player, and it's a big part of our culture using music players, those of us who are always listening to music on the go. And so I thought this was really kind of a really nice transitions and interesting imagining how a music player could be, maybe if it were designed for a specific artist. Just crank my speakers here. So you're able to listen to the music, learn a little bit about the artist, look at maybe what their tour dates are, what their social media connections are. So that is I guess the name of the artist is, and I always require them to find independent artists, somebody who hasn't affected our culture on a very, very large level, because then that comes with all kinds of preconceived type visuals and whatnot. So, again, with gaming, something that I didn't talk about that's available in the Pro edition is physics, which is a really, really great feature. And once my students figured out that you could do that, everybody wanted to create their own pinball game, right? And some of them were not so good, and some of them were really great. This is a really great example. And also it has an Easter egg in it at the end, so when you kind of run out of pinballs, you can unleash this fury of pinballs at the end. So. I'm not very good at pinball, you can see here. That'll keep you busy for a while. Yeah. Okay. That's Pinball. And one of the first times I taught my UIUX class using hype, this one student wanted to do kind of this 8-bit looking Nintendo game called Thunder Paws. So I'll just play this, it'll speak for itself. But just know that like the interactivity of this little character shooting his laser gun and jumping and all that was all timelines, nested timelines, and yeah, it is pretty cool. We started off with this part here, which he did in iMovie and then brought that in, because we got to have that. And then I love the 80s throwback music here. So he's demonstrating the gameplay here. So that's Thunder Paws. And so what was really cool about that is what would happen is the character could walk a certain length within a scene, and then once he hit that area, there was a keyframe that was triggered that would then jump to the next scene and play the next part of it. So what's a lot of fun is watching them push hype software to the limit. Being an instructor is always nice because you'll see them do some crazy stuff and you think, oh, that's never going to work. And sometimes it does, and then you're like, well, that was really cool. So anyway, so those are some examples. I don't know if there's any questions or anything that you might have, but also, if working with scalable layouts with pins, and if you have the pro version, if you're working with different types of viewport layouts and you have any questions and you want to talk to me one-on-one, just pull me aside and we can talk about it. Like any piece of software and new workflows, especially when new features are introduced, first of all, hype is just very intuitive to use, but it's always nice to have somebody kind of demonstrate a workflow. And that's what my lynda.com course does. I am intending to update that course.
Please.
I will. I have to work it out with Linda. But in 2017, there's definitely a lot of things that I want to put into that title and make it a lot more expansive. And definitely I want to do more with the Reflect app in that. So here's hoping, but I intend to. So,
Thank you.
any questions at all?
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So, I understand like the gaming prototyping and whatnot.
Yeah.
But I wonder if is it faster for you to prototype? I know you're a coder. Is it faster to prototype on Hype to show somebody something, or just like throw something together in Bootstrap and show something?
Well, I'm a Bootstrap developer, and I maybe it's because of my Flash background, but I just really much prefer taking a prototype and throwing it together. I mean, that yoga example that I just did, there. I just did for today, and I don't know, it didn't even take me an hour, maybe like a half an hour or 45 minutes.
Okay.
And so, and the other thing is it's like, oh, you don't like that over there? Oh, well, let's just do this. And here, now test it. Here, I'll send it back over to the device. What do you think about this? You know, so just really, really rapid prototyping, high fidelity rapid prototyping is what I use Hype for the most now. I mean, I went into it with this motion graphics and interactivity background, and I certainly use the tool for that. But now I'm using it just really for you know, showing the client what this is going to look like. Clients need to see that. They need to have it in their hands. Yeah.
Does that mean that you're not shipping the final product? Like you're building it outside?
I go back and build it in Bootstrap. Websites, that sort of stuff. And if I were going to develop an app, I'm not an iPhone developer for apps. That's not my bag. You know, so I bring somebody in. I have people that do that. So I bring them in and have them develop. But at least they have a really clear idea of what it's supposed to look like and how it's supposed to behave. And what I love working with developers that develop for apps or like database people, I have some really good people on my team, is sometimes we have ideas that get exchanged where ultimately the user experience is enhanced because of it. You never stop improving it even in the development phase. So this is just square one. Yes?
Are there any big hurdles students have, either from a technical standpoint or from a design standpoint?
When prototyping or using Hype? Just prototyping? Well,
Both.
yeah. The students, I think one of the reasons I developed the UIUX design course the way I did is I teach some web design courses. We do coding and that sort of stuff. And but they really weren't able to translate. Nobody was really teaching them at the time, here's the visual, we're going to make that now with code, right? And so that's what I really focus on is really good wireframing techniques, really good prototyping, low fidelity prototyping. Like I make them draw stuff on paper for a long, long time when they're trying to flesh out their ideas before we even get into prototyping with Hype. Once we get to using or creating high fidelity apps or high fidelity prototype of an app, they've solved so many design problems by this point that all they have to do is work with the software and make it do what they want it to do. I think some of the challenges that I think everybody, or at least my students, when they first learned Hype was getting them to kind of understand the different timelines and working with the different timelines and understanding that like your scene timelines will play automatically unless you tell them not to, and that your sub-timelines don't play until you tell them to. And for good reason, it's set up that way, I think. But you got to show them, with actions how that works. So, yeah.
As an instructor, I'm wondering what kind of prerequisites are on your course? What kind of skills do you assume that the students come in with?
Yeah, these are all junior and senior level graphic design students. So my UIUX course, there isn't necessarily, it's an elective for that course, but like teaching like my Web 1 and Web 2 course, obviously you have to have Web 1 before Web 2. I'm working with the university on the curriculum. I think that this, my UIUX course should be offered in conjunction at the same time as Web 1. They should almost take them in parallel, because I just think that once the students start to understand this is the visual and here's how it gets built, then they go, oh.
But you think they could take your course without having prior knowledge of HTML?
They do.
Well, they do.
No, I mean, there's some who do and some who don't.
Okay.
I will say this, if you have knowledge of HTML, it's when you're utilizing Hype and you're clicking on buttons and you're affecting different types of parameters in the inspector, you start thinking, oh, this is what's happening with CSS, this is going on with HTML, I'm creating an element here, that's what this is. So you have kind of a better awareness, but you don't need to know HTML, obviously, to do some pretty great stuff with Hype. Yeah?
For your UI classes, do you only use Hype, or do you go there for like
We only use height.
Was that?
Yep.
Is that, would you actually think it's better than something like Sketch or Origami or something like that?
Well, I mean, you can use Sketch. You know, you can create your UI elements in other programs and bring them in. I mean, not all the visuals are created in Hype. Hype is kind of like this hub where we can make it respond. We can animate things. We can create interactions with actions and that sort of stuff. So you know, they could use Illustrator if they wanted to, or Affinity Designer is a great tool as well. I really like that one. So, did I answer your question?
Yeah, I was trying to basically see if there's any more, because for the prototyping standpoint, especially it's going to get a feel.
Well, it's more than just prototyping. I mean, they're learning motion graphics and interactivity as well. It's just I had to give the class a title, and so I thought that probably was a good title because that's something I think they really need to learn. Yeah.
In regards to the prototyping, are you seeing any interest yet or requests from your clients for being able to service that prototyping on Apple TV or Watch? Or something beyond
Not yet.
that?
Not yet, but I'm already thinking about that myself. Yeah.
And that is
So-
a version or flag for each of those. But
Oh, there's a question for Jonathan. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I do want to say one thing. One more thing. I always want to have a one more thing slide because, you know, that's what Apple does, so I thought I'd have that stuff. My dear wife was so gracious to come with me on this trip because today is her birthday. So, wish her a happy birthday.